What if you could make better life and business decisions in minutes just by filtering them through one simple lens? My guest today has built multi-million dollar companies, best-selling books, and a world-class culture on exactly that. In today's episode of The Mike Method, I'm joined by my friend Robert Glazer, founder and chairman of Accelerator Partners, co-founder of Brand Cycle, #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and the voice behind the globally read Friday Forward newsletter. Under his leadership, his companies have been recognized by Glassdoor, Fortune, and Inc. as some of the best places to work. And Robert himself has been named one of Glassdoor's top CEOs. Robert's new book, The Compass Within, is more than a parable about finding your core values. It's a practical guide to aligning them with every aspect of your life. In our conversation, we explore how to identify the values you actually live by versus the ones you wish you had, the link between core values and better hiring, stronger relationships, and clearer priorities, why values misalignment is a leading cause of burnout and dissatisfaction, and how to fix it, the real world system Robert uses to evaluate opportunities and say no with confidence. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to build a high trust culture, a leader navigating tough calls, or simply someone ready to stop living on autopilot, Robert's approach will give you the tools to filter out the noise and chart a course that feels right, both professionally and personally. Let's dive in. Robert, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I feel like we're overdue because you and I have known each other since I think it was 2019, actually.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID. When we first met through an organization called MMT. And always been a massive fan. I read your Elevate book, which I loved. Always enjoyed our conversations. And then when you mentioned that you had this other book coming out, I'm like, okay, it's time. We got to sit down and have a conversation. We got to record it this time. So I'm just grateful that you made the time to be here. And yeah, I'm really curious. The Compass Within is the new book. And I'm just curious why write this book and why now?
Yeah. So interestingly, in Elevate, as you were just mentioning, I talked about this concept of spiritual capacity. And a big part of that is understanding your values. And people who read that book and a lot of the questions I would ask, like, I get it. Like, how do I do the core value thing? And at the time I was like, well, it's not really that easy. And like, my problem was I found keyword lists and a whole bunch of stuff. And I had basically built out a training program about the same time that we were doing with classes of leaders at our company on the core values. I was like, oh, this really works. Like, this is helping people do it. And I figured out, how to separate kind of the generic sounding ones from values that they can lead and make decisions on. I turned it into a course. A couple thousand people have taken the course and I've gotten great comments, but a lot of people don't jump directly into a course. And so for a while I've been playing around with, and it's probably 2022, right? 122. I'm like, look, the way a book would be a great way to bring this work to people, but I'm just not sure people want to read a core values book. I'm not sure I would pick up that book in the bookstore. And at the time my daughter had sort of was like challenging me to, like, I'm always challenging them to do differently. Like, you should write a fiction book. You only read nonfiction. You only read fiction. And I don't know, but that kernel was sort of in my head. And I'm a huge fan of Pat Lencioni and Bob Berg's work and the book, The Goal. Thinking about it, like the leading book on operational management is like a parable. It's kind of an interesting concept when you think about it. I was like, actually, I think this works better if I could show it, because what a lot of people roll their heads when they hear core value, and they're just, and so I'm like, let me try to explain to them like what I'm talking about. And you and other friends and people have seen the book early. A lot of them have been, God, I thought you were writing this about me, or I was dealing with a relationship problem yesterday, or this is just like my job problem. And then because I think it again shows where these things kind of meet ahead for us. And it lets you to sort of engage with the topic and identify yourself in Jamie and sort of his journey, but then shows you at the end what it is you've seen in the framework and kind of tells you how to go do this for yourself. So I hope that resonates with other people. I know it's a quick read. I think we're moving towards societal ADD pretty quickly, you know, and so just it's a shorter, easy read, and I just hope it prompts people to have a little curiosity about how this might help them. Like, you're in the 1% of people I talk to who have, clear core values written out that aren't words that are making decisions, I don't think a lot of people really realize how much this could help their life.
Well, and that path for me was the reality of that was it was a function of burnout.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, I burnt out when I was 27 and I realized my life was unmanageable and I didn't understand core values. I didn't
Yeah.
even know the concept. And it got
And as you
introduced.
know, it's not burnout's not about how much work you're doing.
No,
Yeah.
right? At all, because people can work really hard and never burn out, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it was this complete values misalignment, but I had never even heard of the concept. And when I did, and I started looking at what I realized my core values were versus the life and the goals, even the goals I had set, I'd achieved all the goals I wanted to hit by the time I was 30. And I just didn't like my life. So
Huh.
I'm like, well, how do you get everything you want? Right. Because I think, you set goals, you achieve them, you should be happy. And I wasn't. And so I'm like, I don't like something's
It's
broken with
interesting
me.
that ties to this thing I've written on there's a lot of mountain analogies, but on the
Yeah.
kind of three different climbs that I
Right.
think people take. So the first is a mountain that you're kind of totally pushed on by other people,
Right.
parents or experts, and you hate the climb
Yeah.
and you hate the destination. The
Right.
second one, you think you choose the path and you pick
Yes.
it and you like the climb some days, but then you
Yeah.
get to the top and you're like, oh, it wasn't so worth it. And
Yeah.
like the third one is like, it's not about this steep ascent or this summit. I call it's like a vista. It's like
Yeah.
a 5% grade. It has this amazing view, and you'd be happy to climb it for an hour or 5 hours that day. And just the
Yeah.
climbing is enjoyable. Yeah.
That really, that's sort of that third mountain concept that really quite resonates. So when I sent the book and I read it, I'm like, oh, I love it. It reminded me of the Four Agreements and other like incredible books that I've read where they've got such a great parable that I don't have to try to remember the structure or the frameworks. I can just
Yeah.
remember the story. So much easier as human beings, right? Like remember stories easily.
Yeah. Everyone's had, a lot of people have had Matt for a boss, right? And they know that.
Yeah, exactly. And so to be able to relate to the characters and to like have those, and then as you say, have it resonate with people that I've experienced in my life and go, right, okay, I see that now. That's so much easier than like, here's a format, you should fill in the blanks. And,
Yeah,
you
or
know,
understanding what you're missing. It's interesting
yeah,
that the book focuses on this sort of big three: your vocation, your job, your partner, and your community.
yeah,
I think a lot of people forget about the community part and how much of the community is going to reinforce a lot of the values and behaviors that you're going to do. I mean, my example is always like, look, I live outside of Boston in a nice, suburban neighborhood. There are
yeah,
parks, there are whatever. I can go hike and walk every day and I can do that.
yeah,
When I'm out in Park City, like we do it X the amount because it's the default. It's what
sure.
everyone's doing. It's what the culture's doing.
Yeah,
If I go to Newcastle at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone's like, why are we not at the bar? Right. So these are different environments that might
yeah,
align to what we want to do and not want to do. And there's kind of a hypothetical, there's a real town, and the hypothetical Westville's not real. Arlington is actually a real town.
yeah,
But it sort of looks at like, oh, like what is it? If I'm a person who really likes different perspectives and talking to people and whatever, and I live in a town where it's like, which sign are you putting up and which team are you on? That's kind of just not where I want to be.
it's amazing how much we don't think. Like if you think about if a plant wasn't thriving, you
Right.
wouldn't blame the plant. You'd repot the soil, you'd look at the food you were providing the plant, the
Yeah.
sunlight, the water, you'd change the environment the plant was in. You wouldn't like chastise the plant for not growing.
Right. And again, if there's things that you want to do and the people in your community are kind of mostly doing the opposite. Again, if you decide that health is a top priority or value and you don't
Yeah.
drink and everyone's going to the bar every night, like you either are going to like go to the bar and drink what you don't want to, or go to the bar and it's just not the right. You should find friends that aren't going to the bar every night, right? That's
Well, it's funny because when I read the piece around community, maybe it reminded me of the end of chapter 4 in the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. he like the bottom of the page says, list out the 10 people you spend most of your time with. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I'll play along. So I list the 10 people that I spend most of my time with. And then you flip the page and it says where you shop, what you eat, what movies you watch, your political
Yeah.
beliefs, what you read, where you go on vacation, who you marry, who you're close friends with, and on and on and on, are pretty much influenced and controlled by those 10 people.
Right.
You, over the next 5 years, you will become the average of those people.
Right.
Are
Does that
you okay?
feel good to you? Right.
Yeah, like, are you okay with that list? And I went back and I crossed out 4 people. And the 4 people that are in those slots right now, I hadn't met yet. They weren't in my
Right. So
life.
it just goes to we only have a certain amount of capacity for those
Yeah.
relationships. Yeah.
And so I love that you bring that in, because I think, people think family, they think, they think work, they might think health and fitness, but how much of our environment and our community plays into the day-to-day decisions that we're making, what we purchase, kind of house we live in, what
Exactly.
sports we play. Like, so much of our life is driven by it, but it's almost like an unconscious thing, right?
Yeah. Look, we live in a suburb of Boston.
Yeah.
I'd say a high expectation environment. As I kind of brought up my kids, I've noticed that they've taken wants and stuff from the community, even when they're the opposite of what I'm trying to, impart on them. And,
Yeah.
and that stuff, rubs off. It's interesting. The colleges in America now, like the sort of the competitive schools or whatever, every kid, and this is without before AI, they want to be in banking and consulting. Like this is everyone starts the interviewing. And so the other kids who came in as history majors, they're very like, should I be interviewing for consulting? Should I be like, I can
Right.
see it even with my kids. I'm like, no, you should probably do the opposite, because they're all going for the same job too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and
They don't even know what consulting is or what banking is. It just shows you
apparently
how
that's what you're
powerful that is.
supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so, as somebody's reading this book and, maybe they're listening to this podcast and they're like, hey, like, I hear you talking about core values. I've heard other people talk about core values before. How would you define, how would you
Yeah.
define for
Great
people
question.
what is a core value? Like, how would I know
So
if I had one?
if I asked a room, and I've done this, so if I asked a room of 100 people, how many of you kind of have core value? If you thought about it before, you don't have any core values, maybe you thought about it, you kind of thought about it, maybe you wrote something down or some one words, or you have a list of like multiple core values written down, and they're not like one words, and they're not family and integrity and a lot of these kind of things. And the breakdown would be like 60% or like, no, like nothing, 38 are like, yeah, maybe something, and 2 are like, here are my core values, and here they are. Boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. And those people are usually in a different place. And when I say different place to what you're saying, it may not be that they have more cars or a jet or otherwise, but they genuinely seem happy and engaged and are doing the right work and are living life how they want to live it. And so core values are simply your non-negotiable principles that guide your behaviors and decisions. We're going to be talking about personal core values today. There's a whole lot of separate work on corporate core values. They're similar but different, right? They represent a shared set of values amongst people. This is like, what do you value? So I think they're intrinsic. They're not aspirational. When you figure them out, you're like, this is what my 4th grade teacher was talking about on her. I once read a 5-year-old report card to my company, but I changed like the language from playmates and stuff to peers, and everyone's like, totally, like that's him. Like I said, it was 360 feedback, and it was written when I was 5 years old, right? So like it was like, he likes to do the stuff he likes to do. He wants to help people.
Yeah.
Like he's not very motivated if he doesn't want to do it. And they're all
Yeah.
like, yes, like checks. So I got some good laughs when I showed the report card. So they're consistent, right? They show up in multiple areas of your life. That's why I don't think family is a core value. I push everyone this. I think family is a priority. If you explain to me how you show up for your family and how you prioritize family, there's probably a value there that is consistent for how you show up for your friends and your team
Right.
and otherwise that
Right.
can help you, right? But just family, again, what does that mean? what do you value? Like, does that mean like family is a priority? Does that mean like the drunk uncle doing an appropriate thing gets a free pass? Like, what?
Yeah.
I've rarely seen one word core values that can help you, because the number one thing for me around values is decision making. They're clarifying, right? They help you make better choices about who to spend time with, as you said, what work to do, and where to live. So they're kind of this instruction manual you weren't given at birth. And there's a reason you weren't given it, because they kind of are developed from these formative moments. Like, we're all could be in therapy no matter what our parents did or otherwise, because they're just things that hit us the wrong way or otherwise. And what I found is most people, I was doing this work with a couple of people in my forum, and one guy just had like his dad, like, you work hard like that. And we would have told you that was his core value, because that's his, just like, he's always been that way for 10 years. Like, you outwork people. It's not that it's healthy or not healthy, but it is like his operating system. The other guy was in a family business, and they were all the opposite. So people are either doubling down on things that are really important, or they're trying to run away from things that are not important. But these things were true for you, and they forged these sort of things that like became really important, or became really important not to do that. And they carry forth with us as adults, and they show up in leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
having done this work for so many years, I say to people like, look, running a professional service business for 20 years, I could have been a therapist at this point. But like, the difference between me, I know all these childhood stories and stuff from the people I work with, because we've done all these deep exercises and work together. The difference between me and a therapist is like, I'm not going back being like, let's talk to little Mike and figure out who to blame and your parents. But like, let's understand, Mike, that like your dad abandoning you at 10 years old, it shows up for you in the workplace. And either you work with that. I mean, I had a
Mm-hmm.
CEO on my podcast of a major company who told me that, like, his dad abandoned him. And like, and as he sensed that anyone on his team is going to leave, he like freaks out. And he's
Yeah.
totally aware of this. And he shared this with tens of thousands of people. But that's the difference between knowing it and
Mm-hmm.
behaving that way without any knowledge of that.
Right. I think there's a piece in there. I like how you differentiate between saying, well, family is my core value. It'd be like somebody saying, well, success is my core value. It's like, in what? Like, what does that even mean? Right. So getting to the root value, as you say, like, there's a thing you do for your family. You probably do that with your friends. You probably show up this way in community with anyone you care about. So like, what
Yeah, and
are
that's where it
those
can
things?
help you. And I beat them up on it and they hate it. But then here's a couple, like, some people I gotta do, like always show up, right? Like,
Yeah.
being there matters. So that's what they mean. Like, your presence is important,
Yeah.
right? So that is how they lead. That's how they're there for their friends. If they're denied the opportunity to do that, they're frustrated, right? Whereas someone else, it might be about trust, right? And family is a unit of trust. And so they actually just really trust their family.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, people who have a why or a core value of trust usually have a negative trust thing in their life that has driven that. And it's really complicated as a leader. I mean, what we
Mm-hmm.
found out, and this is the difference between not knowing it, multiple leaders over time who had a trust thing, was they just divide people on their team into, are they trustworthy or not trustworthy?
Right.
And if you fall in the untrustworthy and you don't even know what you did,
Yeah. You're
you
done.
can't do anything right. Right. I had an HR person, after I finally explained this to her after someone had left, being like, that makes so much sense. We couldn't understand this guy. Like, he loved these employees this month, he hated these employees. We're going from PIP to promotion. I was like so confused. And I was like, look, this is an example of someone where they are not driving, like the driving instructor on the next wheel is driving them. Because if they were driving, and when I've done this work with people, what they would do is they go back to their team and say, hey, team, I just want to understand, like, I just did some stuff recently. I have a core value of trust. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to me that I can trust people. And things like being late for meetings, missing deadlines, not being able to be found in a work from home environment, like, those dent trust. And if you sense me like disconnected, it's probably because there's been a lack of trust, and we should
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
totally different. We're not going to change. I don't think that person's going to change. They're not going to change at 40. This is real for them. This is a defense mechanism that has protected them their whole life, and it's probably had some real benefits. But again, the leader that can say that and communicate with their team, and the leader that is just like throwing people in the penalty box and throwing out the key without telling them, it has no idea, is probably doing a lot of harm to themselves and their team.
You're touching on a kind of core principle there, around self-awareness, where from emotional intelligence, there's kind of, for people to be able to change or to work towards change, because
Right.
these are
Or to want to
behaviors
change themselves.
if they choose, right? Yeah. And there's sort of the 4A model, right? The 4A model is one, I have awareness. I am triggered by this. So in the case, like I know I'm triggered by this.
Right. I have a threat detection system around whether people can be trusted. And
Yes.
where for me, you come 5 minutes late to the meeting with a better idea, I don't care. To this person, it's like danger. This person's a danger, right?
Yeah.
They,
Well, and step two is like acceptance. Okay, like I'm a person who does this thing
yes.
and it comes from, my childhood, but it's like part of my makeup and it's pretty deeply ingrained. And instead of beating myself up about it right now, I'm just going to accept that this is a thing that I do. That's like the
Yep.
second thing we need to do. The third thing is, which you discussed, is we need to acknowledge it to others. Hey, this is a trigger. This is what happens for me. I'm telling you because we're in relationship or we work together,
Yep.
and this is just a thing for me. That's step three. And then step four is, what is the concrete action that I am going to put in place that is a response, not a reaction to my trigger? Because the reaction's easy. It's like trigger, reaction, trigger,
Yeah.
reaction. But what is the measured and chosen response? And I can't pick it in the moment that I'm triggered. I have to decide in advance that when next time I get this trigger, I'm going
Right.
to
Next time someone's late for a meeting, you say,
yeah,
look, like, just want you to know, like,
yeah,
attendance is really important to me. And I'm going to
yeah,
make this clear to you. And I'm not going to throw you in the penalty box this time, but like,
yeah.
fair warning. Right.
Right. And so one of the options somebody could have in that case as well is to lean into curiosity. Hey, I noticed you were late today. Is everything okay? Like, what a lovely way to be
Right.
empathetic with another person. That person would be like, I was trying to drop my kid off at school. So now the narrative of
Or they could answer something like, my best friend is having a real problem with her husband and I'm her go-to person and she called me and I helped
yeah,
her with her kids this morning.
yeah,
Because what that tells the person is, oh, you're someone who's super dependable and
yeah.
trustworthy, right?
Right,
Yeah.
which is the opposite of
Yeah.
what right? The opposite of the
Yeah.
narrative that I would have gone and reacted to as a trigger. And the problem is that the reactions that people have, I think the example you gave is great, because that narrative would be internal. So the other person doesn't even know that
Yeah.
I'm reacting and that I've dropped trust and that I think that they just don't care about being on time for things. And I've told myself this entire story. But
Yeah.
if instead I chose a response of curiosity, then I have new information that replaces, I don't have a narrative, right? I just have the truth. And then I'm like, oh, well, now I have a different view of that person. So that model helps to, because I think, in the book, you did a really good job of talking about how core values, like the self-discovery sometimes is actually through adversity. It's through these triggers. It's through
Yeah.
situations. They're like these struggles are like the catalyst for
Yeah.
that transformation of discovering what the value actually is.
And one of the most powerful things in that formula is the anti-core value thing. I think, and people have told me that. So
Yeah.
think of someone, I can see it in their head. I don't care who it is, but think of
Yeah.
it. They really bother you. Like
Yeah.
they just, why? Like, what are they doing? And they're
Yeah.
probably like, they're so egotistical. They
Yeah.
think they know it all. They don't listen to people. So you start to understand, because the core value, when violated, feels crappy, right?
Yeah.
We'll give the PG version for our Canadian
Yeah.
listeners. So by nature, right, that's what you value. So it gives some really good clues, that like if you ask that to me, like I really value respect. It's part of
Yeah.
one of my core values. And in fact, one of my kids was talking to the other and they thought they were being funny and it's just really rude and I was
Yeah.
getting really angry. I'm like, look, we're respectful. Like we just
Yeah.
don't talk like this.
Yeah.
And so it is definitely, the word trigger is overused, but
Sure.
it is a triggering thing for me, when people are fundamentally disrespectful.
So then that gives you the opposite. It's funny.
Yeah, it's a pretty good purview into that there's some piece of respect. And now it turns out, like, I have built this into a unique core value that if anyone who know me would say, yeah, that's totally, like, it's respectful authenticity. I really value, it's one of my core values, the notion of telling people the truth and telling people the stuff that people don't want them to hear. Like, do you really, like this morning I said it to someone, the real truth is you haven't gotten better at this. Like, and if you want to get better at it, you need to do it. I can't do it for you, but always with respect, right? So I'm willing to have a lot of difficult conversations and say this stuff, and people will call me for the answer that they don't want, right? They know who to call if they just want to reinforce all their existing beliefs. But like at the same time, I think it's really important to have that authenticity, but like be kind and respectful to people.
It's you're kind of touching on a formula from Radical Candor, which is basically
Yeah, exactly.
right. The two pieces are I care deeply about you, so I'm willing to challenge you directly.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, the reason I had that conversation with that person was because I do care about them and I want to
Yeah,
see them do better. And
right.
if they think they're doing better and they're not, it's not really helping them. And my number one core value is to find a better way and share it. So if I'm
Yeah,
not making things better, then what's the point? Right.
right.
And yeah, so like I think a lot about like if I'm going to give feedback and no one's going to do anything with it and they're just going to be annoyed, what's the point? If I can do it in a place where it's helpful and it provokes change, then great. But yeah, to key on something you said before, look, the sort of Jim Collins level 5 leadership comes from a deep place of self-awareness. To me, this is the core of self-awareness. And any of these things are strengths if
Hmm.
we use them with awareness. And if we don't understand them or we overdo them, they become weaknesses pretty quickly.
Hmm. It's like influence and persuasion versus manipulation, right? Like
Yeah.
the skills are similar, but the intent is different. And I guess the dark side and the light side of the force, to use a Star Wars analogy,
Yeah.
same energy, different outcomes.
And look, so my number one core value and why I'm
Yeah,
doing this podcast with you is to find a better way and share it. Like I
yeah,
enjoy doing that. So the downside of the better stuff is that I am, someone said, the of my sort of prototype is often pleased, never satisfied. Right. And so it's I can exhaust myself, I can exhaust my family, I can exhaust teammates and then kind of never better. And I have to come to this thing and say, look, if I try to make everything better, if
yeah,
my son walks in the room every day and I'm like, you could have cooked those omelets better, like you could have done he's never going to listen to me. He's never going to talk to me and I'm not going to make him better. So I have to know how to dial it down and pick my battles, and because if I do it too much, it actually won't get me what I want.
What's interesting about like Plato has this wonderful quote. It's said in the masculine because it's obviously from a long time ago. And the quote is never judge a man who's making progress, no matter how slow it is. And I think that this quest for perfect and perfection is truly the enemy of progress. Because if it has to be perfect, we won't get started. If I judge people based on their day and say like they have to be perfect, what I'm also saying is like, well, I have to be perfect. And maybe am I always perfect? Well, no. So then why am I judging another person that saying that every day they have to be perfect in how
Yeah.
they show up? And the real question is, are they making progress on the things that matter to them? And then how do I support that? And then internally, am I making progress on
Right.
the things that matter to me? So you saying like, I want to find a better way doesn't mean that you aren't grateful for the ways you've discovered so far, but it does mean that you lean in for you, your growth edge and your that learning zone you want to stay in. You're in that place of like, I want to continue to learn. There may be a better way. I'm a seeker. I'm going to keep seeking.
Yeah, and as a leader, and what I did when I was still hiring people was like, I got to tell people that, right? Hey,
Yeah.
if you're looking for like status quo or like calmness or like you will not like working for me. Like my thing is like come to me with new ideas and like that to me that's only fair.
Yeah.
And there's some people, that look at a core value of like I like one of this ones, include all perspectives. I know
Right.
someone with this value.
Yeah.
By the way, why do you think they have that value? Just take a guess.
Yeah, because they have been in a situation where they felt that they weren't included and they weren't heard and they
Yeah.
felt small.
They spent their teenage years feeling unheard and so
Yeah.
whatever. So if
Yeah.
they're on my team and
Right.
I know that, the best thing I could do is be like, let's say it's Mike or Michaela. We'll go with
Yeah.
Michaela. Hey,
Great.
Michaela, like I need to decide where we should have the holiday party. Will you like connect with everyone, get their feedback, and like come back with like a recommendation on what we think is best, right?
Yeah.
Like awesome.
Yeah.
Like Michaela would be like, yes, that's like right up my alley. I'm like,
Yeah.
Michaela, like we need to have a holiday party. Like we have no time to figure it out. I want you to just pick a place. Don't talk to anyone. Just get
Yeah.
it done.
Right.
Right. Just be like, no, that's
Yeah.
like not what it's just not what I like to do. Right. Yeah. So that's where, look, there are all these personality tests. And yes, it's helpful to know if someone's a, ETSJ or their why or their DIS. But man, if you know their values,
Yeah.
you'll understand. I have watched more adults I have watched that include perspectives person be in a debate with a, make do with what you have person about a budget. And
Yeah.
they're like fighting on this budget. And I'm like looking at the two little kids behind them being
Yeah.
like, you don't feel heard and you think people are wasteful. And like, that is the root of this whole problem.
There's this wonderful art piece that was done at Burning Man years ago, and it's this giant wireframe of two adults. It's a smaller adult and a larger adult. So, assuming it's a man and a woman
Yeah.
back to back, it's a wireframe, so you can see completely through it. It's huge, but inside there's like a glowing white lit up little boy and a glowing white up little girl, and they're reaching through the backs towards each other. And I have that as a backdrop on my computer to remind me of the work that we're doing, which is like, hey, we're all, kids in adult bodies trying to connect.
Yeah.
And we have these values, we have these experiences, traumas, mini traumas. We have a life story that brought us to who we are right now.
And it probably drove your passion. Like a lot of these things drove the passion. Being someone who's super trustworthy and a really good friend, like this is good qualities, right? So I think that's why a lot of this going back and revisiting history and victimology is not getting us anywhere. We just need to have awareness of it, right? Like we need to have awareness, understand that either we're kind of driving with that steering wheel, knowing that like these things, or there's someone at the, extra wheel, like in driving school kind of next door, driving that car for us.
Well, I'm going to use your driving analogy and I'm going to shift gears. So I'm going to shift gears in this conversation to talk about the core value compass steps, because I love the framework that you built that has sort of 5 key things. So one, reflect. So if people are listening to this and going, cool, yeah, great. You guys have me convinced. I want core values. I want to live my life this way. I don't know how I'm going to do that. The compass steps that you have of reflect on your peak experiences and moments of deep frustration, identify recurring value patterns, prioritize a short list of your non-negotiables, test those against real decisions, and then commit to them as a daily filter. I read that, and then I want to throw one more into there, just that I think I found incredibly valuable. And it actually came from a survey that you and I had to do in 2019 before we were at MMT in Cabo.
Oh, fascinating.
What happened was, Jason, who runs MMT, sent out a survey to 10 people that are close to us and asked them to fill in this survey. And it was, what do you rely on Mike for? How does Mike show up most consistently? What are the qualities in Mike that you value? What are the things that you think he values based on how he shows up in the world? And what was wonderful about that is the 10 people closest to me wrote about my values so clearly, so consistently. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm living, like, for me, it was lovely because I'm like, not only it like verified these are my core values, first of all, because I'm getting them reflected, but I'm actually living in accordance with them because they're experiencing it. But then his other question, where is Mike his own worst enemy or something like that? And it showed where there were decisions and ways I was living in terms of the amount of like how hard I was driving myself were actually not in accordance.
Not in accordance, or as we were saying before, you go past the red line and it becomes self-defeating, right?
And so, I mean, in my heart, I was like, yeah, I know I do that sometimes, but that's not what the survey said. The reflection of the people closest to me, it was like, you do this a lot. And so then I had to really sit back and kind of think, well, I feel like that's a great test. Like once you've done the core values compass steps, is almost to like ask the people around you who know you best, what do you think my core values are?
And I recommend that. And so going back to the beginning, and it's in the book, but there are these 6 questions that it starts with. And so people are like, look, if this sounds great to you, you can go pick up the book. You can get the course this week when it launches for free and do the work. Some people like the scaffolding around it that the course does. The book has all the same stuff as the course, but
we'll drop it just before you go into that. We're going to drop in the show notes. There'll be a link to buy the book, but the free course link, which will be available this week on launch week, there'll be a link there too if you want to click on that. So
awesome. Yeah. So the questions are at robertglazer.com/6, the 6 questions. You don't have to write it down. And I'll tell you, like, there's one similar, like, what advice or qualities do people and others come to you for? Like, that's very
Right.
similar to that question. So you take the answers to these 6 questions, which are behavioral based questions. You put them all on 6 pieces of paper. You start looking at the patterns and you pull them into themes. I think the step that I have built into this that people tell me is really unique and is differentiated in terms of the outcome and creating outcomes is this thing called the core validator. And okay, when you get these themes, you're then trying to, like, the first two are, do I have the right theme? Because you're taking all the stuff that, like, was about trust and circling it red and all the stuff that was this, and you're putting them on new pieces of paper. You're like, oh, these are all saying the same thing, which is the
Yeah.
point. But the validator is the first 2 questions about the right theme. Can I use it to make a decision, past or present? Again, most important quality of a core value. So is the concept of this, like, let's say one of my core values is long-term orientation, and so I'm looking at this and, like, think of the long term. Yes, I can definitely think about a decision, and am I thinking about the long term? And when I imagine the opposite, does it strike a nerve? Well, yeah, like people that are, like, talking about how they made $1 bazillion trading Bitcoin yesterday and doing something inherently unsustainable is usually uncomfortable for me. So those are the first 2. And then when I have the right theme, because you want the theme before the wording, in the phrasing, is it more than one word? I find one word one's very hard to know what you're talking about. I have 6 definitions of integrity I've written down. And then can I objectively rate myself on it? Right. So, one of my core values is, another one is self-reliance. Like, I can definitely objectively say, like, you know what, I have been being too self-reliant, not self-reliant enough. And if you run each value through those 4 filters, you will get something. Again, make a decision and objectively rate myself on it. So you're thinking of, like, am I living up to what I said that I want to do? That's what makes them real.
I love that. I love that you've got a test that, and a process that people just go to the website there and do, but then a validation test, because I think without that validation test, it's really easy to land on what a set of core values and go, like, I like these words, this feels good to me. But if I can't validate them, then I probably, it's not that you
right. If I can't confirm, this to me actually is what companies need too on their core values. So different thing, because you should be able to have it in the performance review or on the checklist. So I was working with a company and they were like, our core values celebrate diversity. And I was like, again, are you ever going to sit down with Mike and tell Mike, last month you did a bad job at celebrate diversity. No, but you might say, Mike, you didn't include all perspectives, right? And that's what we meant by that, or something else. So companies would even benefit from running the same filter of, like, can you have it? That's why integrity, like, were you integral last month? I don't know. Does that mean, did you lie? Did you follow through with your commitments? Did you, what, like, if you don't know if you're doing it or not, then it's problematic.
I think, from a business perspective, Jim Collins does a really good job. He's got a core values worksheet you can go through to kind of narrow down your core values. But one of the things he talks a lot about is, like, some of these things you say are values are like table stakes in your industry. Like, if you're in the banking industry and you write down integrity, I'm sorry, but the whole industry survives off integrity. So no, that's not one of them. And so, getting what we did as a company is, there was just 22 of us. So I'm like, well, let's just bring everybody together and like do a core value personal exercise, put all those core values up on the wall and then group them, because we're all the people acting day to day in this business, narrow that down and then say, well, what are the things that we keep hearing consistently from our clients that they love about working with us? Because in that mix, those are our core values. And so it's kind of a blend of that and the EOS work. And we landed on a set of core values that when we read them out, there's like a short kind of phrase and then there's a longer sentence that explains it. It's literally how we show up all the time. And when we're looking to hire people, we're looking to hire people that we think are going to help us to demonstrate those core values consistently. And when something goes sideways, it's because one of those values wasn't followed. And so I think the challenge you can see this on a personal level, but I definitely see it more with companies, is a lot of their values are aspirational. Either they're vague.
Yeah. They're not who they are and who they've been, and they're not. Like to be. And you don't know if you've done it or not, right? Look, it's fine. My kids are university age, right? I say college is like a big city university does not try to share the value proposition and message of a small rural university. And
Yeah.
kids would go to either of those schools and probably love them and say they're amazing schools and
Yeah.
not like the other one. So the
Sure.
game is like, again, we believe in competition.
Yeah.
That would be a company who attracted a lot of ex-athletes. By the way, you could plan the company retreat. There's going to be some like elbows in the basketball game. Probably bonuses go to the top 10%.
Yeah.
But if that's the environment someone wants and they opt into it, great.
Yeah.
The problem is when they do shit like we believe, like, we accept everyone, or we think winning isn't everything. No, that's not, you think that's not what you believe, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be much more like, if you said competition matters,
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, I know to go to this company, or I would not like this company.
Yeah. It's like the company that says, we're fully inclusive. And then today we're, what's our company retreat? It's all sports related.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's going to narrow down some people. So, I think I want to touch on the ripple effect of doing this work, because I think that, one thing is to say that, and this just because it's really, really hit me as a theme in the book is, there's one thing to say, I've gotten clear about what my values are.
Yeah.
You use an example with your son, right? Just on this chat, actually, right? Of like, hey, we don't do that. Like, that's just not part of
not who we are. Yeah.
No, we're respectful, right? So every time you make that statement, whether it's to your kids or it's to somebody in your company, whether it's in a performance review, in a one-on-one, in a conversation with a client, when you're hiring, like, you are creating that ripple effect. So I'd love to hear more about, like, how does this internal work, clarifying what my values are, then permeate out into the world?
Yeah. So, let's look at two realms. I think if you're a leader in an organization, you can actually just show up as you.
Yeah.
You can say, look, I'm going to lead from who I am. I'm going to double down on this. I'm going to let everyone know, and I'm going to wear that with pride. And we both agree, I think self-awareness and authenticity are the core of great leadership, right? I've started out as a leader and I tried to do best practices of other people, and it didn't work very well for me. But that's the default thing. What do most young leaders do? Let me take all the stuff I hated from my bad bosses and don't do that, and copy the things my great bosses did. 100%. Both of those have the same problem. They're not authentically you. Yeah. If it's your company and you're the entrepreneur, I think or the CEO, you have permission to really, like, not try to appease everyone and be like, this is what we value and this is what we do. And our company was always trying to chase away the people that weren't a fit for it. Like, we were one of the first remote work and flexible work environments. So a lot of people apply to work here because it was flexible work. And we're like, oh, did you miss a flexibility plus accountability? Like people that the flexibility is given to those who are super accountable and responsible and do everything they want to do. And we never have to check their work and never have to do anything. You don't come work here because you just want the flexibility. It comes, with both parts. So you're trying to chase away the wrong people. And same thing, I think, with your personal core values. Once exactly what happens to what you said, when you clarify these, you will make changes in your friend group. You will make changes in the 5 or 10 people you're around. You'll say, look, it's very clear to me what I want, right? Like, I want to be, people, they have health and vitality as a core value. They want to be like, their motivation is to be like, up and active with their grandkids. Well, then I'm not going to hang out with the people who, love the ice cream sundae club, every night. And look, there's different things for different people. The example I use in the book, and this ties a little between professional and personal, groups and organizations need some sort of values as a string. Like, why are we here, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say non-denominationally, you have a religious group on a Sunday morning that meets for whatever religion, insert your chosen religion. I don't want an atheist in that group, right? I just don't want someone every day to be like, guys, I just don't think this thing again. Like, that's you can be friends with the atheist. Like, he's fine. He's part of, you be friends with him, but but not as part of your religious study group, right? Yeah. It's just not, that is not the point of that group. That is not why that group has assembled in that way. And I think we've lost the ability to see that. I think we got a little caught up in the craziness a few years ago, and everyone talking about culture fit. And yes, I don't think anyone, and versus culture ad, I don't think anyone ever meant like, I want carbon copies of everyone. No. Obviously, like, that's not good. No. But there's got to be a couple big things in any of your relationships that you agree on are sort of the non-negotiables, for that.
What I love is that you've used the phrase core value compass. I think as you're describing this, like what you're talking about is whether it's teams, groups, or as an individual, you need some sort of compass because
Yeah.
things are flying at you. Opportunities are coming to you all the time. The more successful you are in life, the more opportunities will come your way. Decisions as you go through your life get harder and harder. As you
Yeah.
grow a company, you get bigger and bigger problems. It's one of the things you earn as you grow your company. But all of those, if you don't have a compass for how to navigate those, then it's kind of like one-offing them. And the decisions may feel a lot more challenging because there's no filter to put
Right.
it through. And I
And,
feel like, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say my favorite example of this is Gary Ridge, who I don't know. He was the CEO of WD-40 for 10 years,
Okay.
incredible leader, turned around that company, Little Spray Can.
Yeah.
So Gary taught it like this course 100 times at business schools over the years. And he proved this point. If you haven't heard this, you're going to love this. And I'm
Okay.
sure you'll steal it.
Yeah.
As I did. So Gary asked a group of MBA students, broke them into threes, and gave them a problem to solve and gave them an hour to solve it. Group one were given no core values. Group two were given core values, and group three were given hierarchical core values and said, look, here, these are your core values. And he did this 100 times around the world. After an hour, the first group was still fighting. The second group sort of figured it out in time, their answer. And the third group was done in like 30 minutes. Like, I don't think there's a better example than that, right? Like this is the rubric from which to make your decisions from, right? And the hardest decisions, look, this gets into the 202 course, like call me anyone when you get through the course and whatever. Yeah. In fact, this is covered in the course, but as sort of the after on hierarchical core values. Because actually where people really struggle, and Mike, if you told me two of your core values, I could invent a situation where they intersect. And you got to be really clear in your own mind which one's higher, because those are the things like if you have a do no harm and tell the truth core values, yeah. Right? And you find out your friend's partner, is cheating on them, like you got to be clear with yourself which one is more important, or you're going to really struggle.
I learned this technique from Toyota called the Hoshin Star. And what it does is you compare. So if you had 5 core values, you would take your first core value, compare it to the second core value, and whichever one you would say, well, this one drives the other, this one's more important.
Right. Which is the driver. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
The arrow towards it, right? But then when you compare all of them all the way around, you very clearly can see. So I did that with my core values to get really determined. When my wife and I met, when we were first dating, this is like 17 years ago, and I shared with her my core values. And I said, health and wellness is like my number one core value. And deep and meaningful relationships is second. And then I have 3 more. And she said, wait, what? Relationship is not your number one core value, like deep and meaningful?
I bet I know the answer to this, but go ahead. Yeah.
What do you think my answer was?
I'm sure the answer was something like, and I don't know where it came from or learned, like I learned, like I can't even, unless I'm the best and healthiest version of myself, I can't enter into quality relationships or something like that.
You nailed it. Like I'm like, I take care of myself, my mental health, my physical wellness, so that I can show up as the best version of myself in relationship. Right. And what I think has been fun is that through the years, when I look at the activities that I do and the goals that I set, I'm like, ooh, if I do this activity, if I go play beach,
if I go on a hike with my 5 best friends, right? Like I can start stacking these, right?
Yeah. So I played beach volleyball with my daughter a couple of nights ago because she's getting ready for a tournament, a 2-on-2 beach tournament this weekend. So we went down to the beach to just pepper and stuff and play some games. And I'm like, well, that is freedom, that I have the ability to do that. It's abundance because we live right next to the beach.
Yeah.
It hit relationship because
so
I adore her, and it hit health and wellness because we spent an hour and a half working up a sweat playing beach volleyball against these people that we randomly met on the beach that were setting up a net. So I'm like, 4 out of my 5 core values are being expressed.
So do that stuff, and that gets to that vista, right? The climbs that are just, well, I'll test my theory on this. I'm interested. Like where did the health thing come from you? From a positive experience, from a negative experience? Did you have a health scare?
It's interesting. It came from the burnout because I didn't know my core values. I was always fit, but the thing is, there's a difference between being really fit and being well. And I was not well, and I was very fit. And so that was really confusing.
Yeah.
Because if you looked at me, I looked like I was like, clearly you're in like great shape, whatever, but I was not okay. And I was burning myself out through working out actually. And so that's where that value came from around health and wellness, that before it was really about being in optimal physical condition, but the reality was, it's like having a car that like looks great on
Right.
the outside, but the engine is falling apart, is a little bit where I ended up.
Well, but how many people, I mean, there's a reason why they say every time you get on the plane, put on your mask first, right? And
Yeah.
parents are always mortified by that. How many
Yeah.
people, say, again, family is a core value and they're too exhausted or burnout or
Yeah.
whatever to do anything to show up for their family? Yeah.
What the first time my wife said to me, she's like, this was a long time ago, probably 10 years ago. She's like, the people that you work with day to day get the best of you, and your
Yeah.
daughter and I get what's left of you. And that hit like a gut punch. And she meant it with such love. And
Yeah.
that night, I sat there in my journal and I'm like, I don't want this. How do I fix this? So I said, I'm going to write a number, my energy at the end of the day, between 0 and 10. And I'm going to track that. And I have tracked that number now. Today is like day 1274, I think, of tracking that number every night. And when that number dips down, I look at my day and I look at the next day and I'm like, I'm canceling things because
Mm.
I want to show up at dinner being present. I want to be able to go to the beach with my daughter and play volleyball or watch a movie or whatever, but I don't want to be a puddle at the end of the day. And I'm grateful that my wife had the courage to come and say it so clearly to me that
Yeah.
it was like, okay, I have to act. And I check in with them to see, am I living up to the not just their expectations, but to who I say I'm becoming as a father and a husband, because I'm very clear
Right.
about writing those statements each year.
That's awesome. Well, you've got this stuff down, and again, you're able to navigate. And it's cool when you're like, I'm in flow, and this feels really good. And you look, and you're like, God, yeah, this checks all the box. Like, how do I go create community outdoors? It's not a surprise.
Well, Robert, listen, I have really, as much as I do all these things and I've been a student of all of it, I learned a ton in reading this book. And I just love that you put it into a parable because it's so much easier to remember and describe. And yet you still have the concrete steps and the tools on your website and the course as well that's now available. So please remember to click on the link to get the book and to grab the course. But listen, man, I thank you so much for writing the book for that, because I know that's not easy, especially when you decide to write a parable.
Yeah.
To really, you decided to take
I did not know how to do it, so I made
and
it
you
up
took a
as I went.
nonfiction book and you created a fiction book about it, right? Like that's effectively you created an amazing core values book, but it's also a parable. So I know that takes a lot, and I just appreciate the time that you put into doing that. And yeah, thanks for being in conversation with me today.
Thanks for having me.